A black man is inspecting a large house he just bought in an affluent neighborhood. A racist white neighbor assumes he is trespassing and calls the police. When the police officers arrive, they handcuffed him and took him to jail. They were later shocked to learn he is the new homeowner. Michael Reed had worked his entire life for this moment. After years of tireless dedication and sacrifices, he'd finally purchased his dream home, a spacious, elegant estate in Oakwood Hills, an affluent neighborhood he'd admired from afar. A successful architect, Michael was no stranger to hard work and ambition, but this was something different. This was personal. Owning this home represented more than just success. It was a testament to his journey, his perseverance, and his right to belong in any space he chose. As he parked his car in the circular driveway and stepped out, he paused to take in the house's grandeur. A stately two-story residence with large windows, meticulously landscaped hedges, and a towering oak tree in the front yard. The neighborhood was peaceful, and the sense of accomplishment filled him with pride. Today, he was here to do a final walkthrough, mentally noting potential renovations he wanted to start before moving in. With his notebook and phone in hand, Michael walked up the stone pathway, savoring each step. The neighborhood was idyllic, quiet, and lined with similar grand houses, each with its own personality. He felt like he'd finally found a place to call his own. But as he stood on the front steps, admiring the polished wooden door with its brass knocker, he noticed someone watching him from across the street. Eleanor Hastings had lived in Oakwood Hills for over 30 years. In her 60s, she had seen many neighbors come and go, and she took a particular interest in the people who moved into her neighborhood. Oakwood Hills was a place she cherished deeply, a sanctuary of sorts. So when she saw a man she didn't recognize wandering around one of the vacant houses, her instincts flared. From her window, Eleanor watched as Michael moved around the property, inspecting the details and jotting notes in his notebook. Suspicion quickly took root. The man looked well-dressed, but her mind latched onto the idea that he might be someone up to no good. Unable to let it go, she reached for her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, hello, I'm calling to report suspicious activity at my neighbor's house," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "There's a man wandering around and, well, I don't know what he's doing, but he doesn't look like he belongs here." On the other end, the dispatcher took down her report, and within minutes, 2 police officers were dispatched to the scene. Michael was on the back patio when he heard the sound of car doors slamming. Confused, he walked back to the front yard and was met by 2 police officers striding up the driveway. They were both young, visibly alert, and focused solely on him. "Excuse me, sir," one officer called out. "We received a report of suspicious activity in the area. May we ask what you're doing here?" Michael's heart sank. He'd heard stories like this before, but had never imagined he'd be in this situation himself. He took a calming breath and replied, "I'm the new owner of this house. I'm here to inspect the property before moving in." The officers exchanged a glance, clearly unconvinced. "Sir, we're going to need to see some identification," one of them said, his tone firm. Michael reached for his wallet and handed over his ID. As the officers examined it, he noticed Eleanor peeking through her window, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Do you have any paperwork to prove you own this property?" the officer asked, seeming to grow more skeptical with each passing moment. Michael's patience began to wane. "I don't carry property documents with me. My real estate agent can confirm everything if you need verification." But the officers seemed undeterred. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back," one officer instructed, reaching for a pair of handcuffs. Michael's eyes widened in shock. "You're arresting me? This is my house." "Sir, this is standard procedure," the officer replied curtly. The drive to the precinct felt surreal. Michael sat in silence, his wrists cuffed, his mind racing. How could this be happening? He'd done nothing wrong, yet here he was, being treated as a criminal simply because someone assumed he didn't belong. When they arrived at the precinct, the officers began processing him, taking his fingerprints and photos, while Michael tried to explain his situation to anyone who would listen. "I'm the owner of that house," he repeated, feeling frustration and disbelief building up inside him. But it wasn't until they ran a verification check that the officers realized their error. The title and purchase details were confirmed, showing that Michael Reed was, in fact, the rightful owner of the Oakwood Hills property. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room as the officers processed this revelation. One officer stepped forward, his expression tinged with regret. "Mr. Reed, we're sorry. We had no idea." Michael looked at them, his expression a mix of anger and exhaustion. "Is this what I should expect every time I go home?" The officers, embarrassed, could only offer their apologies. But Michael knew that the damage had already been done. This wasn't just about him. It was about an assumption that ran deeper, a bias he'd encountered before, but never in such a personal, humiliating way. Released from jail, Michael returned to his new home, the sting of the encounter fresh in his mind. As he walked up the driveway, he saw Eleanor standing across the street, watching him once again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He crossed the street, his expression calm but resolved. "Good afternoon," he began, his tone polite but firm. "I'm Michael Reed, the new owner of the house across the street." Eleanor blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I didn't realize. I thought you were—" "You thought I was trespassing," he finished for her, his voice steady. "Did you ever consider that maybe I belonged here?" Eleanor's face turned red as she searched for a response. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to protect the neighborhood." Michael looked at her, the hurt and frustration visible in his eyes. "Next time, maybe ask before assuming. People like me work hard to be here too." Eleanor nodded, her face a mixture of shame and understanding. She had no words to defend herself, and as Michael turned to walk back to his house, she realized she'd made a grave error in judgment. In the days that followed, word of Michael's experience spread throughout Oakwood Hills. Neighbors began to talk, some expressing sympathy, others quietly introspective about their own assumptions. Michael decided that his experience could be more than just a painful memory. It could be a lesson for the community. He reached out to a local community center and proposed hosting an event on racial profiling, where he would share his story and invite others to discuss the importance of inclusivity and empathy. The community center agreed, and soon word of the event spread, drawing interest from people all over Oakwood Hills. Michael was determined to turn his experience into something constructive. He wanted the people of Oakwood Hills to understand that racial profiling was more than just a misunderstanding. It was an experience that stripped people of dignity and belonging. He met with the director of the community center, Susan Miller, a warm and welcoming woman who immediately understood the significance of Michael's story. "I think this could be a powerful event," Susan said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "People need to hear stories like yours. Sometimes it takes someone they know to make these issues real." Michael nodded. "I appreciate your support, Susan. I just want people to reflect before making assumptions. Maybe if they see the impact, they'll think twice in the future." As word of the event spread, Michael began reaching out to local groups to invite speakers who could share their experiences with racial profiling. The event became more than just his story. It was an opportunity for others who had endured similar experiences to come together and speak openly. The day before the event, Michael received a knock on his door. To his surprise, Eleanor stood on his porch, holding a small pot of flowers. She looked uncomfortable but determined, shifting her weight as she waited for him to answer. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed," she began, her voice hesitant. I know I didn't make a good first impression, and I wanted to apologize again for my actions. I brought these as a peace offering." Michael looked at the flowers, his expression softening. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said, accepting the gesture. "I appreciate it." Eleanor fidgeted, glancing at him. "I also heard about the event tomorrow. I'd like to attend, if that's all right with you." Michael was surprised by her request. "Of course," he replied, sensing her sincerity. "I think it'll be eye-opening for all of us." She nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips. "I'll be there," she said, before turning to walk back home, her steps lighter than before. The following evening, the community center filled with people from Oakwood Hills and surrounding neighborhoods. Michael was surprised by the turnout. Residents from all backgrounds gathered, some out of curiosity, others out of a genuine desire to learn. Susan opened the event with a few words about the importance of understanding and empathy before introducing Michael. As he took the stage, a hush fell over the room. Michael's calm, steady gaze swept over the audience, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming," he began, his voice resonating through the room. "I'm here tonight to share my story, not because I want pity, but because I believe that awareness can lead to change." Michael recounted his experience, describing how he felt when he was arrested, how his sense of belonging was shattered by assumptions, and how he hoped his story would serve as a reminder that people shouldn't be judged by appearances alone. His words were powerful, capturing the attention of everyone in the room, including Eleanor, who listened with tears in her eyes. After Michael spoke, a few other speakers took the stage, each with their own story about facing prejudice. One man, a local teacher named Carlos, spoke about being profiled while jogging in his own neighborhood, while a young woman named Mia shared a story about being questioned at a store because of her appearance. As each speaker shared, the room grew quieter, the audience absorbing the impact of these experiences. Many residents, including Eleanor, looked down, processing the weight of their own unspoken biases. When the speakers finished, Michael invited the audience to participate in a question-and-answer session. Several people raised their hands, asking thoughtful questions about how they could be more aware and supportive. Eleanor took a deep breath, her hand trembling as she raised it. "I'd like to ask a question," she began, her voice wavering. How do you overcome assumptions when they're so deeply ingrained? I'm ashamed to say that I judged someone based on appearance alone, and I don't want to make that mistake again." Michael smiled kindly. "The first step is exactly what you're doing now, acknowledging it and being open to change. We're all raised with biases, but it's our responsibility to recognize them and choose a different path. The more we engage with people who are different from us, the more we realize we're all human, with our own stories and dreams." Eleanor nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time, she felt a sense of hope that she could change for the better. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the event lingered in Oakwood Hills. Neighbors who had rarely interacted before began greeting each other with warm smiles and open conversations. The event had sparked something meaningful, opening people's eyes to the subtle ways they could improve their community. Eleanor, still moved by Michael's words, decided to reach out to him. She began inviting him over for coffee, hoping to build a friendship. Slowly, they became more comfortable with each other, sharing stories about their lives, their families, and their dreams. Michael learned about Eleanor's past and her fears about the neighborhood changing, while Eleanor came to understand the challenges Michael had faced in his life. Their conversations helped bridge the gap between them, forging a bond that neither had anticipated. Through their friendship, Eleanor became an advocate for inclusivity, speaking out at local gatherings and encouraging others to listen and understand. One afternoon, Michael received a call from the precinct, the same one he'd been taken to weeks earlier. The precinct captain, Officer David Brooks, was reaching out to apologize on behalf of the officers who had arrested him. "We recognize that mistakes were made, Mr. Reed," Officer Brooks said, his voice sincere. "We're implementing new training programs to ensure that this kind of profiling doesn't happen again. I also wanted to invite you to speak with our officers about your experience, if you're willing." Michael was initially taken aback by the offer, but he sensed the captain's sincerity. "Thank you, Officer Brooks. I'd be open to that. It's important that people understand how actions like these impact individuals and communities." The meeting was arranged for the following week, and Michael felt a sense of purpose as he prepared to share his story with the officers. Michael stood in the precinct briefing room, facing a group of officers who had gathered to hear him speak. Among them were the two officers who had arrested him, their faces reflecting a mix of regret and humility. "Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak," Michael began. I know that we all have responsibilities to protect and serve, but that also includes respecting the people we encounter. My experience was painful, but I believe it's a chance for all of us to learn. He spoke candidly about the humiliation and frustration he felt, and how he hoped his story would encourage officers to consider their actions more carefully. The officers listened attentively, some nodding, others looking introspective. After his talk, one of the officers who had arrested him approached Michael. "Mr. Reed, I'm truly sorry for the way we treated you," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I didn't realize the impact until now. I'll do better moving forward." Michael shook his hand, grateful for the officer's honesty. "Thank you, that's all I ask." Months later, the atmosphere in Oakwood Hills had shifted. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves began interacting more openly, creating a community that felt genuinely inclusive. Michael's event had sparked a ripple effect, leading residents to question their biases and work toward understanding. Eleanor became one of Michael's closest friends, organizing community events that promoted unity and shared values. She had transformed, becoming an advocate for inclusivity and working to ensure Oakwood Hills remained a welcoming place for all. Michael felt at home in Oakwood Hills, knowing he'd made a meaningful difference. His journey from suspicion to acceptance had become a powerful reminder that even the smallest actions could foster understanding and bring about change. As months passed, Oakwood Hills became known as a neighborhood that embraced change. Word spread about the transformation in the community, and residents from nearby areas began attending the events that Michael and Eleanor organized. Together, they hosted monthly gatherings, movie nights with thought-provoking films, storytelling sessions where neighbors shared life experiences, and potluck dinners that celebrated diverse cultures and cuisines. One such evening, Michael stood among his neighbors, mingling and chatting with families he'd once only passed on the street. The neighborhood felt alive, a place where people connected beyond simple greetings. Michael's presence had become a symbol of unity and respect. He noticed a young boy, probably no older than 12, standing with his parents. The boy was watching him intently, and when Michael caught his eye, the boy smiled shyly. "Hi there," Michael greeted, crouching down to the boy's height. "I'm Michael. What's your name?" "Tyler," the boy answered, his eyes bright with curiosity. "My dad told me about you. He said you're making our neighborhood better." Michael chuckled, touched by the boy's words. "Well, Tyler, I think we're all making it better together." Tyler nodded, and his father, who had overheard, extended his hand to Michael. "Thank you for everything you're doing, Mr. Reed. My family feels more connected to this neighborhood now than we ever have." Michael smiled, realizing that the seeds of change he'd planted were beginning to blossom in ways he hadn't anticipated. Eleanor's commitment to change was palpable. She started volunteering at local shelters, becoming a passionate advocate for social justice causes. She connected with community leaders, brainstorming initiatives to promote equality and mutual understanding. One afternoon, she invited Michael over for coffee. As they sat in her cozy living room, Eleanor's gaze grew distant. "Michael," she began, her voice soft, "I want to thank you again for opening my eyes. I didn't realize how narrow my world had become until I met you." Michael placed his hand over hers, offering her a reassuring smile. "Eleanor, you've done so much for this community. Your willingness to learn and grow is inspiring." She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "You've given me a new purpose. I used to be afraid of change, but now I see that change can be beautiful." The two friends sat in comfortable silence, a bond of understanding and shared purpose connecting them in a way neither had anticipated. Eleanor's heart was lighter, her spirit renewed, knowing that her past mistakes had led her to a life of meaningful action. The officers who had arrested Michael continued to reflect on their actions. Officer Matthews in particular struggled with the weight of his mistake, knowing the impact it had had on Michael's life. He approached Captain Brooks, determined to be proactive in making amends. "Captain," he said one morning, "I'd like to work on developing a program that educates officers about the impact of profiling. Michael's story made me realize we need to be better." Captain Brooks nodded, impressed by Matthews' initiative. "I think that's a great idea, Matthews. and I think it would be powerful to invite Michael to speak again." When Michael was approached about the program, he agreed, seeing it as another opportunity to create lasting change. Over the next few months, he worked closely with the precinct, helping to design workshops that encouraged officers to consider their own biases and approach every situation with empathy. At one of these workshops, Michael observed officers working in groups, discussing scenarios that required them to confront their assumptions. He was heartened by their willingness to engage, knowing that small steps like these could prevent future incidents and lead to a culture of respect within law enforcement. The precinct's new program gained attention across the city, drawing praise for its innovative approach to addressing biases. During a community meeting, the mayor himself presented Michael with a certificate of appreciation for his role in sparking positive change. "Mr. Reed," the mayor said, "your story is a powerful reminder of how one person's courage can impact an entire community. We thank you for your resilience and for inspiring us to create a more inclusive city." The audience erupted in applause, and Michael, humbled by the recognition, accepted the certificate with gratitude. As he looked out over the crowd, he spotted Eleanor and the officers, all clapping with pride. It was a moment he would never forget, a culmination of the journey that had begun with a painful experience and had grown into a movement for change. Michael realized that the work he had started in Oakwood Hills could extend even further. With the encouragement of his neighbors, he launched an initiative called Unity in Community, a non-profit organization aimed at fostering understanding and inclusivity in neighborhoods across the city. Through Unity in Community, Michael and his team organized workshops, created educational materials, and provided support to communities that wanted to adopt similar programs. The organization became a beacon of hope, drawing people from all walks of life who were committed to creating a more inclusive world. Eleanor joined him on the board, serving as an advocate for empathy and growth. Together, they traveled to other neighborhoods, sharing their story and inspiring others to embrace change. Years later, as Oakwood Hills continued to thrive, Michael looked back on his journey with gratitude. His experience had taught him that every challenge held the potential for growth, and that even the most painful moments could lead to positive change. He and Eleanor remained close friends, their bond forged through shared hardship and a dedication to making their community a place of respect and inclusivity. Michael's legacy was woven into the fabric of Oakwood Hills, a reminder that one person's courage could inspire an entire community to rise above fear and prejudice. Michael often sat on his porch, watching neighbors greet each other with open smiles and waves. He knew that his story had made a difference, and he felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the neighborhood he called home had become a place where everyone, regardless of background, could feel they truly belonged. One afternoon, as Michael sorted through his mail, he found an envelope with no return address. Curious, he opened it to find a handwritten letter from someone named Rachel Lewis, a young woman who lived in Oakwood Hills. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Reed, I wanted to reach out and thank you for the change you've brought to our community. As a biracial woman, I used to feel out of place in Oakwood Hills, never quite sure if I truly belonged. But seeing how you've stood up and inspired others to see each other differently has changed my life. You've given me a sense of belonging, and I wanted to let you know how much that means to me. With gratitude, Rachel Lewis." Michael's heart swelled as he read her words. He hadn't realized how deeply his actions had resonated with others in the neighborhood. Rachel's letter reminded him that the journey to inclusion and acceptance was ongoing, and every person touched by his story became part of that journey. Eleanor, now a respected advocate in Oakwood Hills, began organizing monthly community conversations at the local library. These gatherings were informal and offered neighbors a safe space to discuss issues, share stories, and ask questions about topics that they might have once avoided. At one meeting, Eleanor stood before the group, sharing her own story of transformation. She spoke candidly about her initial suspicion of Michael and the regret she felt for assuming he didn't belong. "I was raised to believe that safety came from keeping the unfamiliar at arm's length," Eleanor said, her voice steady. But Michael taught me that safety comes from understanding and embracing our differences. It's because of him that I've been able to open my heart to new ideas and people. Her honesty moved the room, and many neighbors approached her afterward to thank her for her vulnerability. Eleanor had become a symbol of change in Oakwood Hills, showing others that it was never too late to grow and evolve. As Michael's presence continued to shape the community, he struck up a friendship with one of his older neighbors, John Phillips, a retired history professor. John had been initially indifferent to the changes Michael had brought to Oakwood Hills, but over time he grew curious and began attending the community events. One day John invited Michael over for tea, eager to learn more about the man who had sparked such a transformation. Their conversation was lively, with Michael sharing his experiences as an architect and John recounting tales of his travels and teaching years. At one point, John leaned forward, his expression contemplative. "Michael, I must admit, when you first arrived, I didn't think much would change in this neighborhood. I thought people were too set in their ways." Michael smiled. "Change takes time, John. It's like building a house. You have to start with a strong foundation. And for us, that foundation has been empathy." John nodded, clearly moved. "I'm grateful for what you've done here. You've reminded us all of the value of community." Their friendship grew from that day, each man learning from the other, their bond bridging generations and backgrounds. Inspired by Michael's organization, Unity in Community, the Oakwood Hills Neighborhood Association decided to launch its own initiative, the Welcome Project. This initiative aimed to provide newcomers with a warm welcome and an understanding of Oakwood Hills' commitment to inclusivity and respect. Michael served as an advisor, offering guidance on how to foster genuine connections. The association prepared welcome kits for new residents, filled with local resources, introductions to neighbors, and an invitation to the monthly community conversations. At the next association meeting, Michael spoke about the importance of making newcomers feel at home. "When I moved here, all I wanted was a sense of belonging," he said. "Through the Welcome Project, we have the chance to make everyone who joins our community feel that they are truly part of it." The project launched to overwhelming support, and residents felt a renewed sense of purpose in making Oakwood Hills a place where everyone could thrive. A few months later, Michael received an invitation from the City Council to attend an awards ceremony honoring citizens who had made significant contributions to their communities. To his surprise, he learned that he had been nominated by Eleanor, who wanted to recognize his tireless efforts in fostering unity and inclusion. The ceremony was held in a grand hall, and Michael's heart swelled with pride as he took the stage to accept his award. As he looked out into the crowd, he saw familiar faces: Eleanor, John, Rachel, and many others who had been part of his journey. In his acceptance speech, Michael spoke about the power of small actions. "Change doesn't always happen in big moments," he said. "Sometimes it begins with a single person willing to ask questions, to listen, and to open their heart." I'm honored to be part of a community that values growth, compassion, and the courage to see each other beyond our assumptions. The applause that followed was thunderous, and Michael left the stage with a heart full of gratitude. One evening, Officer Matthews visited Michael's home, asking if they could talk. As they sat on Michael's porch, Matthews took a deep breath. "Mr. Reed," he began, "I've thought a lot about the day we arrested you. I want you to know how deeply I regret it. Working on the new program has opened my eyes to things I never understood before." Michael placed a hand on Matthews's shoulder. "Officer, I appreciate your honesty. What matters is that you're willing to learn and change. That's all anyone can ask." Matthews nodded, visibly moved. "Thank you for your understanding. You've taught me a lot, Mr. Reed. I'm proud to call you a friend." Their conversation ended with a sense of peace, the last remnants of that painful day fading into a newfound trust. Over time, Oakwood Hills became a model of inclusivity and unity, drawing attention from surrounding neighborhoods and even other cities. People came to learn from Michael and his team at Unity in Community, hoping to bring a similar spirit of connection to their own communities. Eleanor continued to lead community conversations, her voice now filled with confidence and compassion. Her story of personal growth inspired others to confront their own biases and embrace empathy. Michael's home became a gathering place, a symbol of what could happen when people came together to make a difference. On any given day, neighbors would stop by to chat, seek advice, or simply express their gratitude. As years passed, Oakwood Hills thrived. Michael's influence had left an indelible mark, one that would be remembered for generations. His story became a legacy in the community, a reminder that true strength came from understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to inspire change. Michael and Eleanor continued their work, now focusing on expanding unity and community's reach to more neighborhoods. Their friendship remained as strong as ever, a testament to the power of redemption and shared purpose. When they spoke to others, they always emphasized one message: that every person had the ability to foster change, no matter how small their actions seemed. Oakwood Hills had become more than just a neighborhood. It was a beacon of hope, a place where everyone felt valued and seen. And for Michael, that was the ultimate reward. Michael's experience became a story passed down in Oakwood Hills, a reminder of how one person's courage could change an entire community. The neighborhood thrived, its residents committed to ensuring that everyone, regardless of background, felt they belonged. Michael often reflected on his journey, knowing that while the road hadn't been easy, it had been worth it. His story stood as a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the profound impact of empathy, proving that a single act of courage could change hearts and create a legacy of inclusion. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting and captivating racial discrimination stories.